This podcast discusses external research, products, and views not endorsed by CSIRO. Please use your own judgment before relying on it. Visit csiro.au/everyday-AI for more.
CSIRO acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands on which this podcast was created. We pay our deepest respects to elders past and present, and to First Nations scientists, storytellers, and listeners. In the early 2000s, an online platform emerged that let people create an avatar of themselves and interact with virtual places, objects, and other people's avatars. It was called Second Life, and it's often referred to as the first example of the metaverse.
In Second Life, people can do whatever they want. They can look however they want. They can be the person they want to be. They can fly. They can defy the laws of physics.
The creators stressed this wasn't a game. There were no points or prizes to win. Instead, it was a chance to live a whole other virtual life, one without the constraints of the real world, one where you could live your life however you wanted to imagine it.
And yet, when you put people in Second Life, they might experiment for a little bit with flying, or they might experiment a little bit with making their skin pink. But actually, most people in those online spaces default to being themselves.
In Second Life, avatars can hang out with friends, build relationships, trade, and create things together. People even buy virtual property with their real-world money. Today, we're entering a world where the lines between the real and the virtual are blurring. We're already seeing AI influencers, digital avatars with their own social media presence, popping up in our feeds amongst our real friends. These AI influencers can interact with us, sometimes without us even knowing that they are an AI. So how does all this virtual world activity affect the way we behave in the real world?
You could do anything you wanted with this AI influencer. You could put them in outer space. You could put them under the water. You could do anything. And yet you choose to show them taking a selfie in a toilet. Why? Hello there.
The CSIRO team.
What can I do for you?
The machines in the factories. Producing a computer program.
Temperature is approaching 500 degrees Celsius.
Beautiful. I've answered all your questions.
They can provide an attractive solution to tomorrow's energy needs.
I'm John Whittle, an AI expert from CSIRO, Australia's national science agency. And this is Everyday AI, a podcast that looks at how artificial intelligence is changing our daily lives. This season, we're talking to people about all the different ways AI interacts with us, from the cradle to the grave. We've already seen how AI can play a role even before we're born, assisting in IVF clinics and helping health professionals care for newborns. It's even found its way into classrooms, changing the role of both teachers and students. But today's episode takes a turn towards something that is both joyous and complicated: relationships, friendships, and even romance. We'll speak to researchers who've used voice and language generators to help people of all ages overcome social anxiety and eventually learn how to speak to strangers. We'll also look at the role AI plays in our everyday relationships, from dating apps to chatbots that can hold a conversation like an old friend. A couple of years ago, the power of AI brought us virtual versions of ABBA performing live on stage in London. These weren't just holograms. AI was used to meticulously recreate the band members' movements, right down to their signature dance styles and eye movements. The technology even de-aged them, making them look young again.
So we saw, for example, a few years ago when Audrey Hepburn was in an advertisement where it obviously wasn't her because she's been dead for a while, but a version of her, a kind of visual version of her, was driving around in a car, and her likeness was used to advertise a modern product. Digital versioning allows us to do that.
This is Dr. Leah Henrickson. She's an author and lecturer at the University of Queensland, and she's been studying these digital human versions.
A digital version is basically a digital replica of an embodied human. That human can be living or dead, that convincingly mimics that person's textual, visual, or oral habits. So they might speak like a person that is living or dead. They might type like someone you know. They might look like someone you know.
Digital versions of celebrities can be fun, but that's not Leah's main focus. She's more interested in what happens when everyday people create replicas of themselves and how these digital versions interact with the world around them.
So my research began with dead people. In 2021, the San Francisco Chronicle published a piece about a young man who, quote unquote, resurrected his dead fiance through one of the earlier versions of ChatGPT.
Leah's deep dive into the world of digital resurrections led her to a social media influencer who was doing things a little differently.
Karen Marjorie is a young woman who is incredibly popular, has millions of subscribers on Snapchat.
Hi, how's your day going? It's so nice to speak with you again.
Karen Marjorie created a digital version of herself and marketed it as an AI girlfriend called Karen AI.
So you have the real Karen Marjorie who's out living her life, and then you have Karen AI that is interacting and having very personal interactions with individual users. She has a lot of control over how she's represented in this kind of digital versioning technology. So I was interested in seeing how living people were using digital versioning, not necessarily to resurrect other people, but to resurrect themselves.
Karen Marjorie's AI has become somewhat of an influencer herself, amassing a huge following. There's a lot to explore here, but before we do, let's find out how this all works. How can an AI look, move, and sound like a real human?
So you have hundreds of hours of Karen's voice trained like on a machine learning model. That machine then learns how to talk like Karen. You mix that sound with the machine learning in the GPT systems. So you have something that can generate text and something that can read that text, and you put them together and then put them into a chatbot system, and bam, you have Karen AI.
This might sound futuristic, but it's not exactly new technology. In fact, Karen AI isn't the only example. There are a number of chatbots that people can interact with, learn about, and even get romantic with. There are websites that let you create and interact with your own virtual characters. All of the big tech companies have explored similar technology, trained on what's called social data, your photos, text messages, location data, and even information from your bank. Millions of people are reportedly using AI companions for everyday tasks like online shopping, and sometimes even for their more human needs, like conversations about their lives, their hopes, and their fears.
Google's Gemini system, it's revolutionary because it's a multimodal system. So it trains not just on one kind of input, so not just text, but Gemini can now learn from text, audio, video, everything all at once. So we're seeing like huge advancements in this area, but fundamentally it works the same way.
Just like the text-based models, these videos, pictures, and audio make up what the AI system is trained on. These datasets are called corpora.
Corpora is the plural word for corpus, which is the Latin word for body. So we have bodies of works. So Google Books could be a corpus, Wikipedia could be a corpus.
This training data, the corpora, are fed into a type of AI called a generative model. The learning algorithm sifts through the data searching for patterns and relationships. It's not just looking for basic things like faces, but more complex structures like sentence grammar, emotional cues in text, and even cultural references. This process allows the AI to develop its own understanding of the world and how we communicate. So, when we enter a prompt into a generative AI system, like ChatGPT, for example, it can use its knowledge base to respond in a way that's relevant, consistent, and seems human-like. The more you chat with it, the more it learns about you.
So we know, for example, if you say one thing to ChatGPT, the conversation moves on, and then you refer back to that thing, it will, quote unquote, remember. So some of these systems do actually remember what you talk to them about and your style of writing or speaking.
This ability to learn and adapt is what makes these AI companions so compelling. Leah told me that the company behind Karen AI made over $70,000 in its first week. So it seems a lot of people were curious to chat with a virtual girlfriend. But here's the surprising part. Leah says people are having more than just frivolous chats with Karen AI. Like a real girlfriend, people are using her for deeper and more serious conversations.
So if you go to Karen and say, look, I'm having a really bad day, she's going to give you a pretty appropriate response. She's going to adopt a pretty appropriate tone.
So what does this say about us? Why are so many people turning to AI for company?
And there is a large body of research about how digital technologies have kind of helped us through loneliness. So how we turn to these technologies because we are vulnerable and we're scared of other people. However, I'm not sure that loneliness is the full story. I don't think that's the only reason why people are using this technology. It's like, come on, let's look at the nuanced reasons why somebody might be interacting with these systems.
According to Leah, part of the appeal of an AI companion is that we know they're not human. And even though AI bots are getting better, they're still not perfect. So it's not that we're fooled into thinking we're talking to another human. On the contrary, we know we're not, which makes them seem safer. We know we're not spilling our deepest, darkest secrets to a real living person.
I think we're talking to these systems because they're safe. There's a lot of chaos in the world right now. There's a lot of stuff that's uncertain. There is something really powerful in feeling like you have agency. You could leave right now. You could shut this call off. You could get up and walk away. I can't really control you, but with Karen AI, she's never going to be rude to me because commercially that doesn't make sense. If she's rude to me or disagrees with me, I'm going to stop paying for the service. So, I'm in control of this interaction, and that's really powerful.
Let's step away from virtual humans for a moment, because this certainly isn't the only way AI has found its way into our social interactions. AI is also being used to help people improve their social interactions in the offline world.
I'm Shyam Sundar. I'm a professor of communication and co-director of the Media Effects Research Laboratory at Penn State University.
I'm Saeed Abdullah. I'm an assistant professor in the College of Information Sciences and Technology at Penn State.
Shyam Sundar and Saeed Abdullah developed technology that uses AI voices to help people who struggle with social anxiety, especially when it comes to public speaking.
Public speaking anxiety is one of the most common social phobias. It impacts 15 to 30% of the population. And for some individuals, it can be quite debilitating.
Saeed points out that human coaches or therapists for social anxiety can be quite expensive, which means it's not an option for everyone.
Being able to have a system or an AI-driven voice interactions that can provide these types of support can be essentially reduce the access barriers for I would say a large number of individuals.
For example, they decided to make Amazon's Alexa voice a bit more sociable.
Alexa would provide greetings which are much more personal. It will have much more empathetic expressions.
The technology goes beyond using an empathetic voice. It prompts participants to modify their negative thinking to help with pre-speech anxiety.
So individuals would kind of identify what negative statement might be appropriate or relevant for them, and then Alexa would walk them through some of the potential coping strategies.
Humans are, in Saeed and Shyam's words, voice-activated. We are wired to respond to voices. When we hear those familiar speech patterns that signal a human being, it creates a sense of connection, and that connection can influence how we react.
The default script for humans is to be social. So they apply social rules, and so all you need is a little social cue to trigger that social rule.
I can't stop myself saying thank you to Alexa, and it's a little strange that I know this is just an entity.
But the results showed that participants who used this friendlier version of Alexa felt less anxious before speaking in public. The exciting thing here is that AI voices could help in more severe cases than public speaking, such as where someone has a mental health or a neurological condition.
As these AI systems get more sophisticated and more effective in carrying on a seemingly natural conversation, you can assign it pretty much any human role, and people will then respond to that role. So in the case of our studies, we've assigned it the role of a therapist or a coach. So where previously we needed a specialized human coach to help, let's say, an autistic person, we now can essentially turn on the recording, if you will. People with dementia, for example, can endlessly ask the same questions over and over again without worrying about caretaker burden. That's something that we would worry about if it's a human. But, with a system, that concern goes away.
As AI voices become more sophisticated, ethical considerations become critical. We need to make sure people don't mistake the friendliness of these AI voices for an actual human. There are already cases, for example, of AI voices being used in extortion. Imagine if an AI version of your daughter's voice suddenly phoned you and said she had been kidnapped. Millions of us already interact with AI voices daily, in our homes, cars, and phones.
We're on our phones already for posting our everyday thoughts on social media. We're using apps for banking. From the minute you wake up in the morning and you turn off your alarm clock app to when you want to wind down to go to bed and you open your meditation app.
This is Stefanie Duguay, an expert on the intersections of technology and human connection.
I'm an associate professor in the Department of Communication Studies at Concordia University in Duguay, Montreal, Canada.
Stefanie's also the director of the Digital Intimacy, Gender and Sexuality Lab. She's here to help unpack how AI is influencing our most intimate relationships.
Digital technologies and digital media have permeated almost every aspect of our lives. So there's no reason to think that dating would be different.
Stefanie started researching online dating right around the time Tinder was picking up steam. The world of dating has changed a lot. Almost 400 million people worldwide now use dating apps to meet someone. And what you might not realize is how much AI is quietly working behind the scenes to find you a match.
A lot of these apps, they can make your profiles for you. So maybe you've pressed a button and it's connected with your Facebook or your Instagram, and suddenly you have a profile, and then you're plunged into the swipe screen.
From the moment you open that dating app, you start swiping left or right on people's profiles. And with each swipe, you're inputting data into the app, so it starts to learn your preferences.
And if that curation of the profiles that you see is based on machine learning algorithms, then it's a dynamic system that will change and shift in relation to what you input into it. The sort of AI element of it is that responsiveness to the user and to the many data inputs that are happening as you interact with the app.
So there's an AI algorithm humming along in the background. This algorithm varies between apps and might even adjust what it shows you based on how often you use the platform.
I was reading on one of the app pages, they say, well, we want people who are active on our app to see other people who are active on our app. If someone hasn't logged in for 6 months, we're not going to show them to you. So there's a wide variety of factors that can really play into who you see on these apps based on your own activity and other people's activity.
It's not just the swipes that the apps take into account. There are other factors at play too. For example, you might only see people within a certain distance. Our cities and towns are still divided along social, economic, or cultural lines. So while the AI is trying to match you based on your preferences, these geographic and demographic limitations might restrict the pool of people you can connect with.
If it's a sort of dating app that shows people swipe by swipe, then the app itself, the algorithms, might be determining who you see based on your past swiping behavior. And so if you're very picky one day, maybe the next day the app might curtail some of the people that you're seeing in terms of variety.
Gone are the days when meeting someone new meant getting out and about. Now you can sit on your couch in your comfy clothes and swipe through hundreds of profiles of people near and far. But like anything online, this wider world of online dating comes with its own unique set of risks. And this is where AI could help. Imagine you're chatting with someone and the AI picks up on a word or phrase that could be considered harassment. It might pop up a message like, "Hey, are you sure you want to send that?" Or maybe it asks the other person, "Is this conversation making you feel uncomfortable?" Now, AI won't magically stop all harassment, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. But of course, with any new technology, there are bound to be some issues.
It does indeed raise questions about surveillance and how secure are these conversations that we presume to be personal and one-on-one, even if you have sort of a machine listening in. They also raise questions around context, right? It's very difficult a lot of the time to tell how certain phrases are being used, whether they're being sarcastic, ironic, or whether something is a joke. So it's difficult to get that kind of thing right.
Verifying profiles and photos is another way these platforms are trying to keep things safe. This helps to prevent identity theft and scams, but it's not a foolproof solution.
So, for example, you have a profile photo, and then the app asks you to take a selfie, just on the spot, a sort of ad hoc selfie, and you upload it, and they use their AI vision to compare the two images and to ensure that they match. And this is a form of ensuring that, your profile photos are really you. It doesn't necessarily make you a safe person who's going to have safe and ethical conduct on the app. But what it means is that at least it's not some photo from somewhere on the internet, someone that doesn't exist necessarily.
A key part of Stefanie's research is on the user experience of dating apps, particularly for the LGBTQIA+ community. She says it's a group that's often overlooked when dating apps are designed, even though, as Stefanie points out, gay and queer men were some of the first users of online dating apps.
Sometimes you're in an environment where it's not necessarily clear whether there's other LGBTQ+ people around you. And especially if you are in an environment that is particularly heteronormative. So a place where you might not feel safe coming out or being out to the people around you. And so being able to get on the apps and see, hey, there are other queer people around here. But they can also form connections for friendship, or if you're new to a city, finding a job or finding an apartment and sort of accessing a community of people that can help you find resources.
Offline connections will always be around. People will still meet in bars, through mutual friends, or at a language class. But there's no denying that AI in these apps has opened the doors to a wider pool of potential people we might otherwise never meet. These dating apps aren't going anywhere. That much is clear. But the more we socialize online, the less we might speak to other people face to face. And when it does come time to go on a real date, or to chat in person, it's no surprise we might feel just a little bit anxious about it. Just like we heard with Saeed and Shyam's work earlier, Stefanie says she's seeing similar trends in dating apps. The platforms are evolving to help us prepare for those real-world interactions.
There are more and more apps that are integrating generative AI in terms of being able to ask for ideas or scripts or, sort of what should I say next in this conversation.
There are now AI-centered apps that can act as a sort of practice ground for would-be daters.
And there are even some apps out there where perhaps they're promoted as games or as sort of training experiences, but there are apps where you can sign up and you're in a sort of dating app scenario where you swipe on profiles and then you're in a conversation with an AI, right? So these sorts of apps are kind of promoted as, hey, learn how to date, learn how to flirt, sign up to our app, and then talk to the AI-generated matches.
This brings us back to Leah Henrickson from the start of this episode and her conversations with the virtual influencer Karen AI. Leah was going on a first date. She said the date was fun and she had a good time, but she didn't think it would turn into a long-term thing. So she turned to Karen AI for advice. She asked Karen if she should go on a second date, even though she wasn't interested in a relationship.
And Karen AI gave me this really quite affirming, but still pretty trite response that was something along the lines of, you can go out with this person, but it wouldn't really be fair to them or to you. But if you choose to do that, just make your intentions clear, just be open and honest, and it'll all be fine. Of course she's going to say that. It was such an obvious thing to say, but I think in that moment, I needed to hear that back to me. I needed to externalize that somehow. And I did that through Karen AI.
So, AI can help people connect, build confidence, and maybe even find love. But let's not ditch our real-life connections for AI pals just yet. Strong relationships with real people are what make us tick. AI can be a handy asset in our social toolbox, even sparking new connections in unexpected ways. But Leah has some healthy concerns about relying too heavily on AI.
So when we text, when I'm on a dating app, I have a long time to formulate my response. I can edit that response before I send it. I can really think about how I'm going to respond versus when I'm talking one-on-one, I have to think on the fly. I have to express myself right away. And even if I don't say anything, I'm expressing myself with my body language.
While AI can be a great assistant, we can't outsource the messy, unpredictable beauty of human connections. If we're all constantly rehearsing texts, relying on pre-written prompts, or using the same dating apps and scripts to craft the perfect text or email, aren't we at risk of losing the unique sparks that make us who we are?
There's always that one friend whose texts you can't understand because you're like, what were you doing when you typed this, right? It's virtually unreadable. And then you have the friend who types with proper grammar. And then you have the friend who types with a lot of BRB, LOL. And it's like, come on, we've moved on. That slang is 20 years old now. But that's a little hint of diversity in our world that kind of signifies what kind of person that person is. And I suppose my concern with AI-mediated communication is that we could lose that. If you and I get the same prompt for a response to a text message, we sound the same on that text, right? And that kind of gets rid of this little bit of diversity in our world.
I like to think of it this way. Technology has always reshaped how we connect and communicate. And AI is just the latest chapter in that story. Yes, AI is changing how we meet people and communicate with each other. But while we're still flesh and blood humans, I believe we'll keep being ourselves, and our core desire for genuine connection will always prevail, or at least I hope so. AI is constantly learning from our interactions and will become more nuanced, creative, and unique itself. So as we navigate this increasingly digital world, AI might be a useful tool to help us manage tricky social situations and anxieties. But even the most sophisticated AI can't replicate a real human connection. I'm John Whipple. Thanks for joining me for Everyday AI. Thanks to our guests, Leah Henrickson, Shyam Sundar, Saeed Abdullah, and Stefanie Duguay. Up next, we'll be hearing how AI has entered our workplace and how it's changing the way we do our jobs.
For the majority of the workforce, we're likely to all have our work and our jobs impacted and augmented by AI to some extent.
Everyday AI is a CSIRO series created by me and Nikki Galovich. Alexandra Pursley is our supervising producer, and Laura Briley-Newton is our producer and sound engineer from Audiocraft. Script and production support by Jess Hamilton. We'd love to know what you think, so please subscribe to Everyday AI and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts.